everyone, and welcome to Representation in Cinema. We talk about the representation of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people in movies. This podcast is hosted by Our Voices Project. Our goal is to dismantle destructive stereotypes of minority groups perpetuated in the media by producing films centered on the multifaceted experiences of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. Our Voices Project acknowledges and honors that the lands we live, love, grow, work, and learn on are the ancestral homelands of the people of the Onondaga, one of the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, along with the Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, and Mohawk, and Tuscarora. We acknowledge that our society was founded upon the exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples through centuries of genocide and forced separation from family, culture, language, and from land, spirit, and mind. As filmmakers, we are committed to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism through truth-telling. We invite all of you, our listeners, to join us in enacting justice by taking such steps as helping to work towards truth, healing, and justice for Indian boarding school impacts by contributing to the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. I'm Courtney Schaus, the Education Outreach Facilitator for Our Voices Project, and joining me on today's podcast is Jackie McGriff, our co-founder, director, and producer. Jackie McGriff, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our honored guests today making their debut on the podcast are Ronald and Ronnie Garrow of the Akwesasne Mohawk Bear Clan. Ronald Garrow is the founder and executive director of the Indigenous Peoples Center in Rochester, New York, a nonprofit organization supporting and promoting awareness of the Indigenous peoples' culture, primarily the Haudenosaunee. While creating and running the Indigenous Peoples Center, Ron serves on the board of directors for Thank you, a Mohawk community in Fonda, New York, and works full-time at the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles. Ron grew up on the Akwesasne Indian Reservation of upstate New York and currently lives in Rochester, New York, near his children and grandchildren. He has worked with many individuals and local entities through speaking engagements, interviews, and public events to bring positive change and celebrate the Indigenous cultures that are present in our region. He enjoys spending time with his children and grandchildren and is a Mohawk language speaker. Welcome, Ronnie. Ronnie Garrow is a 2021 graduate of Irondequoit High School. Ronnie played football and earned all-county accolades and was the team's most valuable player. He was recognized as an all-star for lacrosse as well. In 2021, Ronnie was a featured panelist on BIPOC Voices Be Heard, a virtual safe space for students of color to share their experiences with racism in their daily lives at school and in the community, as hosted by the group Erase, Eliminating Racism and Seeking Equity. Currently, Ronnie attends SUNY Morrisville and is majoring in applied psychology. Welcome to Representation in Cinema, Ron and Ronnie.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so tonight we are going to talk about the film Indian Horse. Indian Horse is the story of Saul Indian Horse, a young Canadian First Nations boy who survives the Canadian Indian residential school system in the 1970s to become a star hockey player. The film is based on the novel by the same name by Richard Wagamese. Indian Horse stars Sladen Peltier, Forrest Goodluck, and Ajuawak Kapashesit, who all portray Saul at different stages in his life. Stephen Campanelli is the director. So if you haven't watched the film already, you can watch it on Netflix now, so we encourage you to watch it and then come back to listen to our podcast. From here on out, we will be discussing the film in depth, so spoilers ahead, and as always, you have been warned. All right. So before we actually start discussing the film, I also want to give the disclaimer that this movie does introduce the discussion of Canadian residential schools, which in part includes harms against children, sexual abuse of children, secrets and shame. And after watching this film, I also do want to acknowledge and give our great thanks and appreciation to both of you for being here to work through this film, discuss some very hard and critical topics. I do really appreciate that and value that very much. And so do our listeners.
Absolutely.
No.
Also, thank you, Ron, for all this time telling me that I need to see this movie because it was absolutely amazing. And I'm really, really happy that that with your gentle pushing, this is something that we are bringing to our listeners, because I think that our Voices Project was very moved on a lot of levels as active allies in our community. And I was very touched by the writings of this author. And I think if we can just start out with maybe getting first impressions.
Are you looking at me?
Sure.
Okay, well, with me, the first impressions of the movie was actually we ran into it accidentally. We were looking for a sports movie, and we ran into this, and we started watching it, and I was just devastated by the what was going on, and I thought that it was a documentary about this famous hockey player that grew up and became a famous NHL player, and I thought that's what we were watching. So we were exposed to this atrocity that happened to our people for like over 100 years, and it hit us. It hit me actually harder because I wasn't even expecting it, and it's just a horrible thing. You know, you can't even get away from racism and the things that have happened to our people, and get away from being Indigenous and dealing with trauma even in your own living room. And you turn on TV and there it is. When you're trying to escape your day and everything that you deal with on a daily basis, just being a normal person with the stress from work and the stress with your relationships and the stress with your home and your bills, and you turn on and you hear and then you see what happened to your people and the generational trauma that it caused, and the whole film was just unfortunately not even as bad as it was. It was worse than the film. And that's why I was like, wow, it's pretty good. I mean, it's not as... It was worse than that, I think. But, yeah. One man's story, which could have very well been my great-grandfather's story, and my son's great-great-grandfather, a man who I knew, could have been very well been his story. Mm-hmm. But he played football with Jim Thorpe at Carlisle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you watched this film with your dad too by accident?
Yeah, by accident.
Yeah.
And it took me too, because I wasn't expecting it. Because when I picked it, I thought it was just a movie to like kind of honor our people and like show like the sports side of things and stuff like that. But what it goes to show is that we're so numb to it, and that we don't show it enough about our culture, about Native American culture especially, to show that these are the things that happen to us. It's kind of just pushed to the side and doesn't really matter anymore. And that's the sad part about it, because a lot of people don't know what happened. So everyone thinks that, this is just a joke or this is just that, but really they don't see the trauma that it's been going on for generations for our people. So that's what was taken away from me in the movie, and especially that the church did that. It wasn't regular people, it was the church that did that to our people.
Yeah, and it's to hear you say that is very striking to me, because as I was doing research to prepare us for the podcast, I came across some information about the author, who actually said he did pass away in 2017.
Oh, man.
Yes, he did. But back in 2012, there was an interview where he was talking about when he started writing the book himself. He was going to write the book about just a hockey book about the triumph about this Indigenous young man who was going to make it big, and he was going to. There was an actual dream, an alternate reality sequence in which Saul Indian Horse faces off in a one-on-one shootout with Vladislav Tritek. It was very much a shoeless Joe does hockey kind of story with a residential school as a very, very nebulous kind of background. This is where he starts out. But then he says his parents and grandparents were both residential school survivors, and soon that legacy became a central focus of the story. And he explained that it wasn't about the politics, but it was because of the roots of the residential school system being so far entangled in Saul's identity. And so it's interesting to hear you both say that, where you both thought you were going to be watching this, sports movie. Mm-hmm. But it ended up being so much more, and it sounds like that's sort of where the author was coming from, too.
Yeah. Right.
The author also, since we started talking a little bit about the author, he did die in 2017, but before he died, he did give his blessing to these white filmmakers, white producers, saying, I think you're doing a good job with where you're heading with this movie. I want you to produce this. And if you didn't know, Clint Eastwood actually was one of the producers of the films, too, actually, after seeing what was going on and how well it was being managed and how important the story was.
Wow.
And just something else that I thought was striking is that each day before the shooting, the filmmakers were careful to honor the culture that they were seeking to portray, which was Ojibwe. And they started each day of filming with a smudge and a prayer that could have lasted up to 45 minutes, a ceremonial prayer. So they did take a lot of time to actually honor and give a lot of time to hold space and emotion for everybody on set. And I believe it was up to 52 Indigenous people were actually hired to actually make the film happen.
Well, that's good. I'm glad they took care of them. You have to have psychic boundaries and emotional support, and that's a lot to deal with. And not just to have from a colonizer's viewpoint when you say you have empathy and sympathy, but the fact that these are my actual relatives that this happened to. My great-grandfather, that happened to them. And, there's not a single Indigenous person that didn't affect them, and it happened to somebody that you're actually related to. And that, when that actually hit me, because growing up in a colonized classroom, it did affect my thinking, and I really didn't fully comprehend that. Wait a minute, it's all being presented as what happened to them, what happened to them, what happened to them. But then when I start losing my colonization thought process, I start, wait a minute, that's not what happened to them. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to us. And it just hits in a whole different way. Mm-hmm.
There were some other facts about the film that were very moving, and I don't know if you knew this when. Oh, well, it doesn't sound like you knew much about the film when you were watching it. I didn't know a lot of things about the film either until after when I started researching. But
I didn't want to ruin it for you, so I just said go watch it. And,
those type of movies,
right?
Yes, and so when I started doing some research, the young actor that played Saul, when he was taken into the residential school, and they immediately bathed him and took his clothing and his stone, and they cut his hair. They actually cut his hair. And when the young actor learned that he was going to have to cut his hair, he actually had reservations about playing the role. He did not want to cut his hair, but he decided, because he had several older relatives that had actually attended residential schools, that he wanted to do that to help teach others. And so he said that he and his family wanted to make that sacrifice. And I was hoping you might be able to help us understand what that means, to have to cut your hair,
So I have to cut your hair. It's a struggle because it's a part of your culture. So it's a struggle to be able to do that because when you're cutting it, you're really thinking like, what am I doing? It's like this is part of me, and now that I'm been bullied down to that much to do that, it's a struggle. It's tough because when being indigenous, like your hair is part of you. It's your culture. Everything you braid your hair, it starts with that. You wearing it when you're little, everything like that. So it's tough, especially when you get it cut because that's all you know. So it is tough, especially with that. And when I cut my hair, it was because I was bullied. So it was tough for me. So I know it's especially when he says it's honoring. It's not honoring. It's more of showing people that this is what happened to us and this is what they did. So it's a learning lesson, not I'm honoring my people. It's more to teach people what they did to us.
Yeah.
Tell them about the bullying. What do you mean about the bullying? Okay, well, when we about getting the haircut and that sort of thing, and I seen Ronnie one day and he had cut his hair, and I was like just wondering why that was, and I was like, why'd you cut your hair? And he's just like, oh, I just wanted to cut it, and just and that was it. I was like, okay, but then when he was on his what was that thing you did with the voices with the teens?
The race eliminating.
Yeah, the event with the race.
Yeah, with that event, then he shared that there was a lot of he was being singled out, and people were pointing out, and he was hearing things directed towards his long hair and being a male and that sort of thing. So, in order to fit in, he told me he said on there that's why he cut his hair, and that really. That really affected me. I was really sad when I heard that he had dealt with so much racism, and that in order to assimilate into the predominant culture, or whatever you want to call it, and to fit in, he cut his hair just to look like him. But as it turned out, wasn't the case, and continued to hear more.
Yeah, and at the school too, we see right away what happened to the children who wouldn't stop speaking their language, and we see that with the character of Lonnie, who apparently never stopped speaking his language.
Nope.
Because even at the end, when they're adults, he's still speaking his language. And we know historically. I know, Ron, that you are actually continue to learn your Mohawk language, but you didn't grow up really speaking it or learning it.
Yeah, no, they didn't. I didn't really learn my language. Like I said, we came from, because of residential boarding schools, they stole our language from us, and there was no really access to learning my language here when I became an adult, and I was able to seek it out. And so I've learned my language the best I can, and I continue to do that now. And, my motivations are to be able to speak to my grandchildren in the language that the Creator gave us and not the language of our colonizer. And she currently is learning her language as well in her school. So we get to share in our language, and that's really touching to me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it seems interesting to me too that Saul didn't really stop speaking his language either. He just wasn't as defiant as Lonnie was.
No.
In a way.
Well, also for boarding schools, since they told us we couldn't speak our language, we would speak our language in quiet, like speak it really low, so they wouldn't be able to hear that we would speak it. But we'd always still practice it and do it without the blind eye of them watching over us. So that's how they're still able to keep the language going, but it was very hard for them to keep it going.
Yeah, Lonnie was a sad character in that movie. He refused to assimilate all the way from the day one and tried to move, tried to leave, and he received, and they throw him in a cage or something because he,
Traumatized him.
Yeah, he was traumatized, and he still wouldn't assimilate, and he never assimilated the whole time he was there, and Yeah, he was affected by it, turned into an alcoholic drunk living on this out on the streets of Toronto, which that's it was a horrible.
It happened to a lot of Native Americans back in the day because of the boarding schools. It would send them into alcoholism or drug addiction and all these things because that's what they helped to mechanism to cope with it for what they went through and their trauma.
Which is one of the, so it's interesting when we see, I know we're skipping ahead a little bit, but then it's interesting when we see Fred and his wife were residential school survivors, and they seem to be able to take in Saul and offer him some stability. And we don't really see that they're having any kind of outward trauma in terms of addiction or a reaction like Lonnie, for example. So you actually see that. And their son also doesn't seem to have any kind of, he says at one point, my parents don't talk about it, which is also very common in terms of residential school survivors, to the point that some families don't even understand that their families were actually in residential schools because it's never talked about.
Right.
It's kind of like the Vietnam War, like the soldiers, they're sworn in not to speak about it. It's kind of like them. They just want to push it down and not want to bring it back up. They just want to push it down and hold it down there and say, this isn't part what happened to us. Let's move on and turn a new leaf and try to make the best of it. So I think that's what the two parents were trying to do. They were just trying to make the best of what happened.
The trauma, because of so much trauma.
Yeah, and my family, we never really spoke about residential boarding schools or anything. The only thing that we ever heard about was that my great-grandfather went to Carlisle with Jim Thorpe, and that was the only reference. There was never any speaking on any of the trauma that went on there, or any of the abuses that occurred. That was all we pretty much the only thing that was discussed, even if I asked. And nobody really wanted to talk about that. Yeah. So, and an interesting part, when he left and he went to the to that home, and we skipped through about an hour of the movie. We went right to the
interesting part of it.
When they called him over and they told him that he can leave and go to the go with them, it was just like he was so institutionalized. He just was standing there like, what do you mean I can leave? Like, he never thought there was ever an option that he could ever leave. Like, he the first time in his life he was ever, a decision was his. And he just, it seemed like all the way, even when he went and got his bags and he was leaving, it was like, is somebody going to stop me and tell me that this wasn't real? And that was another subtle but sad, really sad part of the movie for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, you bring up Jim Thorpe, and he had, his athleticism, and, that was definitely a way for him to escape and sort of, break out from those experiences for him. And it is definitely a way that Saul is, he's good at this white man's sport, that it's being referred to. And then it's also, you start to see where he's pretty much being told this is really a white man's sport, but he's really excelling at this white man's sport. So what do you think that, hockey did for him? I mean, you see Lonnie, if you were to compare Lonnie and Saul, what do you think saved Saul?
She's using quotes there for save for all
Yeah.
who can't of
Sorry,
course,
that's
listen.
right.
No, it's fine.
Want to start? I feel like it brought out the parts that he was able to get some of his anger out about what was going on with it. Because when he's on the ice, he could skate and get his emotions out. But it it's kind of tough because you're still thinking about it constantly. It's always on your mind. But I just feel like sports brought out the part of him that he couldn't, and it expresses himself. So I feel like that's what sports did for him. It helped him express himself.
I think that the hockey, when he was at the residential boarding schools, was a good thing for him to take his mind off of what was happening in the school. And he got to be able to, admired by people and even get some special treatments. And that was a good way to occupy his mind to escape the horrible things that were happening in the school. When he left the school and then he made it up to we would call it the AHL now, and he started playing in the bigger arenas, racism came back, and it was no longer an escape for him, and just dealing with the constant racism and hearing all those people make those racist taunts and hearing the noises, the stereotypical Indian war whoop noises at him, and he'd score, and they'd throw those little figurines on the floor, make the war whoop noises, and the media couldn't cover him without making some stereotypical reference to him. Saul lit up the warpath tonight with 4 goals. He scalped the other team. All those terrible things, and it's a terrible thing. You grow up with the racism, then you think you finally escaped it, and then going to go do something that you love, and then it's even worse, dealing with more racism, and he could never escape it. And he'd what was that one scene? Got up in the morning and went to go read the newspaper, and about how good he did. And there's a picture of him with a tomahawk a big war bonnet on, and it's just like, what? Why? And then why does he have to always deal with racism constantly? And it isn't just an embellishment for the movie either. It's true. It's really how things are, and then that faction of people are even represented in the movie. He's like, oh, just get over it. Mm-hmm. And that is even people are out there right now these days, currently saying that, oh, just get over. Everybody is so sensitive. Why does everybody have to be so sensitive about everything anymore, these days? And people say that, and I hear that every single day. Oh, so what? He just had a picture of him with a war bonnet on, and they just were doing that making them war whoop noises. Why does everybody have to be so sensitive? And that's and it drove him to madness. He had to quit doing the thing that he loved because it just
couldn't take it.
Couldn't deal with drove him to alcoholism. Mm-hmm. Right.
So being in there was a great juxtaposition between when he actually did get up into like that white man's world. Again, I'm doing the air quotes.
Yes.
But it really was the white man's world actually, because he had these agents or managers who were just telling him, just leave, don't worry about the psychological abuse. You're going to do great. You'll do fine.
Just because they're being like rude. And I was like, dude, it's more than rude. Like
exactly. He was being re-traumatized is what it was. And everything that he had experienced he was just being re-traumatized, and they were unable to support him. Whereas when he was with his friends, his Indigenous team, the Moose, some things that really struck me, the whole scene in the bar when they just all went out one at a time and just got beat up. And like, they were still joking about it. They were like joking about it. And, there's this sense of humor that comes with the coping of the trauma, but they were still there for each other. And he joining the team and having come from the residential school where it seemed like a lot of the other guys on the team didn't know that world, he still was a little bit more hesitant to just kind of let things go, whereas the rest of the team wasn't. but they still had that sort of way to cope together. He didn't have that support system anymore, right?
Yeah. So it was a struggle for him because you come from a place where people, yes, they're native, but they don't truly know what happened, but they're accepted of it because they had family relatives that were inside of that sort of situation, going to boarding school and doing things like that. So they were more accepting of it. But when he went to the other team, it was a white man's world again, like you said. So it was tough for him because, for instance, the guy behind him when he got his jersey, when he was in the locker room for the first time, he said, "You better make me look or I'm going to beat you up." That's not a good teammate. That's not having somebody's back. With the Moose, he knows that they had his back. Say somebody hit him into the boards, his teammate will go over and hit the other guy and tell him, stop taking that. On the other side of things, if he was on the other team, they'll hit him and they'll just look at him. So it goes to that part that he knew that they had his back, but he knew that here they weren't never going to have his back.
Right.
Yeah, humor is definitely a way we've dealt with generational trauma, and we continue to use it. Playful banter. You see they're using a lot of playful banter with those teammates. They call them Bambi and stuff. And when you deal with Indigenous people or you're around Indigenous people, and that is something you have to get used to. I've had, people who are not used to it, and they don't really realize that it's just part of the culture. And once they get it, and then things are. It's like, oh, I got it now. It's just, and then then everything's fine. But that actually is part of the culture diversity training. They used to send some people out to the reservations to work with Indigenous people, and they'd come back and say, I can't work with them. They keep picking on me. They're always joking. They can't. And they're like, had to sit them down and actually have a training and say, no, that's just how Indigenous people are. They do a lot of joking and playful bantering. It means you're doing good. If they're doing that, they feel comfortable with you, and you should, you're doing well. Go back out there. And then they get it and they're able to work with them. And they learn they got to let them know beforehand before going out and deal with them, or work with them, I should be saying. Yeah. So that's something that we noticed too. The other night when we were watching with Ronnie, see, look, they're joking with each other. They're still joking about it, no matter what. Indigenous people, our humor is legendary, and some of the funniest people you meet will be Indigenous people. And even currently with the news media and the things that they've done, we've made so many jokes about it. Like when CNN, they did a survey and they said about who voted. They had white people voted, whatever percentage this is. Black people voted this percentage. Hispanic people voted this percentage. Asian people voted this percentage. And then it was...
creatures?
No. And then it was... something else.
Yep.
I was like, something else, 3%, something else voted 3%, something. I was like, there's something else. And then we just went with it, It was like, started going online and then just making so many funny jokes about something else. Is like Christopher Columbus didn't discover America because something else was already here.
Oh, my gosh.
And, we just started, and people post some beautiful woman out there, Indigenous woman's like, well, ain't you something else, and all those, and there's so many funny jokes. They just can't keep us down because we just keep laughing and rolling with the punches, And there was what he was talking about was ABC News. They were doing a segment on Indigenous films and TV shows that are doing well, and she said, next up we're going to be featuring the indigenous creatures that are taking over the news, or the something like that. She called us creatures.
Yeah,
it's like indigenous creatures. Wow. And they didn't even, I didn't see any apology or retraction or anything like that. They just acted like it didn't even happen. And, they call us creatures. And that's what comes with the the form of racism that we deal with, which is called invisibility. And this is one of the things. If another group had been called creatures, I don't think it would have went over so well if they would have said that about black people.
Yeah. As a black person on the podcast, that's a hell yeah.
But somehow they were able to just act like it never even happened.
Yeah.
They just didn't address it. They didn't apologize about it. There was no retraction, nothing. But we got some good jokes about it and everything, and they were all over the place.
Related to Bigfoot.
Oh,
did you see that one?
No, which one was that?
It was on memes. They said they were related to Bigfoot because we were a creature.
Oh, the other indigenous creature, and they had Bigfoot on there and stuff. And I forget some of the funny memes that they have, but yeah. What was some of them?
There was a big poster of all the other mythical creatures.
Oh yeah, and then an indigenous person there. It's like the indigenous creatures, and it's really funny. We got a really good sense of humor. It's something that we have to deal with after dealing with residential boarding schools and genocide and racism on a daily basis, which still affects us every single day. As a matter of fact, just before I came in here, I got a kind of triggered parking out front when he came out and was like, hello, are you looking for somebody? It brought something up for me when in my youth, I was parked in front of like my girlfriend's house and somebody crossed the street. I was like, no, I'm fine. Thank you. And they called the police on me. And that brought that up, for me. And because I was in Gates and they're like, what are you doing here? It's like, well, I'm just parked on the street, not bothering anybody. And the cops pull up on me and ask me what I'm doing. And so I'm waiting for my girlfriend. It's like, well, who's your girlfriend, Bill? And they want to go check it all out and see why I'm parked in the middle of the street. But that was like 30 years ago. And that brought that, and that, I guess you call it re-traumatized. Kind of. Mm-hmm. I really wasn't getting ready to cry or anything, but I did.
Still brought it up, yeah.
But I did, remember that, and that wasn't a nice feeling. So racism is alive and well.
Yeah, in the film, you talk about the invisibility of Native people, and you just go back to the way they handled the death of the little girl at the residential school, and there was no service for her. There was no discussion about it. There was just, she was there one day and the next day she wasn't. There was no humanity in the way the kids were treated. And you mentioned how they just didn't do anything with the grandmother who had died.
Left her on the side of the road.
Yeah. So those messages were loud and clear in the way in the book, in the movie. And those messages are still, present today, as you were alluding to, that it's just the way that they're delivered, that have changed. In the book, too, especially those examples that you were alluding to around the sports, the way they were throwing those figures on the ice and things like that, those are very loud messages, very loud racist messages that people today, I think, would be sort of really surprised and shocked at, to think that things like that are still happening today. And, we'll see that in our mascots, like our mascots today. And I know there's lots of people who are trying to get mascots in different high schools in our region changed over. I know in Waterloo recently their mascot has been changed. But I know, like, especially for you being the most recent athlete, is that something that you've experienced or continue to experience? I know you continue to play sports in college.
I did, especially in high school. I would experience it because when I was playing lacrosse, the team original name was the Irondequoit Indians, but we changed it to the Irondequoit Eagles. So a couple of the parents, actually, my dad was at the game, and they had the Irondequoit Indian shirts on. And my dad went up to the school to inform them of it and like how offensive it was and stuff like that. And they didn't really see anything offensive with it. They thought that it was honoring our people. But at the same time, it wasn't really honoring us, because if we put on there a white person as a logo and said, we're honoring you, this is you, we're honoring you as our mascot, it would be up in flames. So it's like people don't see the racism within it. They just think, like he said, visibility. They just think that it's just there. Oh, you guys are just a name. But if we had you as just a name, it would be okay.
Yeah. And I don't know, were there incidents of, even today, like in college sports and things like that, are people making do people say things or?
Not so much in college, because they're more like exposed to it, because it's more out there. So like kids are more mature now, so like they want to learn more stuff and they want more research like on it. Because people will come up to me and ask me, "Oh, you're Native American? Where are you from?" and stuff like that. Instead of coming at me, "Oh, you're Native American? Get away from me." Instead, they want to learn it and they want to know what's about the people.
Oh, good, interesting. Well, that's a good change, positive change. Mm-hmm. Good.
Well, the thing that brought me into this work, and it just couldn't stop, and what brought about the change in Irondequoit was an incident that happened at the basketball game in Irondequoit, and that was only in like 2019 maybe.
It was.
And we were at the high school basketball game, and during halftime, Ronnie was sitting he didn't want to sit by me, he wanted to sit in the student section because he's way too cool to sit with me at the basketball game. But not too cool to come ask me for something at halftime for some money to go get some concessions. So he comes across the floor, and he gets about to the middle of the floor, and he received about the same treatment that Saul received, and they started making the racial taunts and calling his name and making the war whoop noises in the middle of the gym when he was in the middle of the gym floor at Irondequoit. And I mean, there's hundreds of people there. This news media was there. The athletic director, 2 different teams were there. And there's a packed gymnasium because that was the year they won the state. And nobody cared. They were making racial comments, bigotry comments to my son in front of hundreds of people, and nobody cared in the whole gymnasium. And I brought it to the awareness of a security guard, and he literally was like, "So what?" And he's like, "Are they doing it anymore?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, I don't. What do you want?" I was like, "Well, who can I talk to who's more?" He's like, "Well, there's the athletic director over there." So I brought it to her attention, and she said, "Well, they're not doing it anymore. We'll talk to them." And who did it? I was like, "Well, what do you?" And they said they were going to talk to him, but they didn't really do anything at the moment. And so that led to further discussions. I came back up to the school and talked to the principal the next day, and they said they were going to speak with the students about it and bring some diversity training to the schools. And that led to discussions with the superintendent of school and the curriculum advisor on making some changes at the school. And positive changes are going on at Irondequoit because of those discussions that happened. But I don't remember anybody apologizing to my son about that. And again, they just acted like it just didn't even happen. And a similar incident happened to a black student out in, I think, Penfield, like 2 years later at a soccer game. They said he was called a racial slur. And they were firing the coaches. They were firing this athletic director. They fired the referee. They suspended students. I mean, heads were rolling about this. And, it happened, the same exact thing, racial slur, racial bigotry occurring to my son. And nobody did a single thing about it. And there goes some more invisibility. It's not easy being an Indigenous person. Mm-hmm. So that hit me extra hard when I was watching that, and I would assume my son as well, when Saul was hearing every time he did something good, hearing all those racial taunts coming out of the stands and throwing things at him, and the players doing the war whoop noises across the line from him and doing all those things. And I really, truly think that I bet there's people out there that think that that is exaggerated. And it's not. The people probably think it's exaggerated for the movie, and it isn't. And that stuff still happens even now. It's horrible.
And so one of the other really good things about that I learned from doing this research is that this movie is actually shown in schools in Canada as part of 10th grade curriculum, as part of their Truth and Reconciliation, to make their citizens aware.
That's good.
Of what the truth is and what really happened.
Yeah.
It's a start.
Their Truth and Reconciliation programs, at least they're trying to do something right, trying to make some kind of reparations, and it's spreading to the United States as well.
It is, and we do have, in the United States, of course, we do have our history, which over the last couple of years, we're becoming more aware of. We do know that there's been more than 350 government-funded, often church-run residential schools. As of 1900, there were 20,000 Indigenous children in these schools, and as of 1925, there were 60,000 Indigenous children in these schools. And these residential schools in the United States ran for 150 years. Mm-hmm. So we do have a long history and a long legacy, and a lot of truth-telling that we still need to do.
No, this was after the Indian Removal Act and genocide for another over 100 years of that. And then you went for another 150 years of residential boarding schools.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. So there is a lot of work to do. That this film, the goal of the film was to start the conversation in Canada about the truth-telling, and I think this is, a goal of our Voices Project in doing this podcast too, is to keep the conversation going and to help people understand. And to lift the veil of invisibility. And so, every time we do say the land acknowledgement, and we do talk about the Healing Coalition for Residential Schools and ways to give and to educate yourself. You have people educate themselves about the history. And it is something that we would like to see in schools and talked about and acknowledged. Because I think, Ron, what you said earlier in the podcast is worth repeating, that there's not one Indigenous family that is not impacted by residential school systems. It's just a reality. It's a fact. And even through the, very end of the movie, where you think maybe, okay, he's escaped this history of residential school, this trauma that he's been through and what it's done to him, what it's taken from him, his family, his language, his person, his culture, then we actually learn that there was more to the abuse that he suffered, even in the last, few minutes of the movie. There was more to his truth that he had to come to acknowledge or just
come to amends with.
Yes.
Oh, you mean when he revisited the school after it had been closed?
And then he went to his grandmother's land, ancestral land, and actually cried.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's how far he's come. Mm-hmm. And that he's finally made it.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't have a lot of emotion throughout the entire movie, right? His emotion was shut off. you'd see glimpses of the one emotion that he could have was happiness when he was playing hockey, and that ended when he started when he left and went to Toronto. So he didn't even have that emotion anymore. Yeah, it's terrible thing. I mean, it was a good movie. They had a lot of good reference. I mean, historically accurate references, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And the sad thing is that it was even worse than the movie said, because afterwards, we're up to 10,000 bodies have been found outside of these residential boarding schools.
Counting.
Yeah, and counting. They haven't even gotten through all of them yet. So, that's when I seen the little girl when they were just disposing of her body, and they're burying him on the side of the school. It's like, what kind of school needs a cemetery?
Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of a school needing a cemetery? And they just burned her in a barrel, right? And that was it. And it's terrible what the little kids had to deal with. They didn't have any dolls or anything, any toys to play with, and they didn't. Nobody consoled them when they got hurt or gave them a hug and told them that they loved them or anything like that. That's how they had to grow up and deal with life like that. And it's I mean, and then it hits me doubly hard. I said it again, but I mean, it's okay if I say it again. Mm-hmm. Those are my relatives.
I know that's kind of like what happened with Lonnie. If you look at him, like in the beginning of the movie, he was happy, joyful, like wanted to get out of there, wanted to go back to his culture and like the things they did. And then when he got older, when Saul was about to get out, you could see that he completely was broken. Mm-hmm. So that happened to a lot of kids that were there. They were broken, so they had no emotional attached to themselves anymore.
Right, and we see the ones that did assimilate, even through assimilation wasn't the answer, because they still dealt with racism, even if they had assimilated. Generically, Saul assimilated so that he could play hockey. And he went to this school and he graduated, I guess, to the school. They said he aged out. He did his whole thing. And, he was never really in a lot of trouble, so he was an assimilated, I guess, what they consider a success. And the purpose of it was so that Indigenous people could be accepted into society. That was the premise of the entire premise of it. But then when they leave and they go and they're still not accepted, even though it's like I gave up everything so that, I can be accepted in society, and they still don't do it. And they're still not accepted. And then they can't even go back to their home reservations, and there's people there that will not accept them anymore because they don't know about their cultures and they don't know about their language. And so they're turned away. And that may be what happened to Lonnie. And then, he's not accepted into society because, he never wanted to assimilate. But he can't go back to his reservation. He doesn't even know those people anymore, and he won't be accepted. And probably lost his language and his culture, and they won't accept him anymore. So now he becomes a bum on the street. And so did Saul. He was sleeping in the park, and with no education or job skills. And it's a horrible thing that what they did to us.
Yeah, it was very much by design, and in Saul's case, he didn't have anywhere to go home to.
You had the mooses.
The mooses, yes, You're right. He did. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have had anywhere to go. Mm-hmm. So there was some bright spots, and it was nice to see at the end of the movie that he did find like his home. He did find his place.
Found his way back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is true.
Yeah.
Are there any final thoughts? There is that. I think what you were sort of alluding to, Ronnie, is there is that glimpse of hope that he is healing, that he's sort of come full circle.
Yeah, especially like when he's up on the hill, you can see like the way that he's looking at them, like he's finally made it home. Like I've went through all this trauma, I went through all this, and I'm finally where I need to be. I'm with my family.
Yeah.
So I think that's what was the basis of the movie too. That no matter what you could go through, you're always gonna have your family, and that's what you have to go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the movie closed up nicely. I just some of the things that were coming out for me yesterday, the other day when we watched it was people just saying get over it. I mean, I already covered that, but just saying get over it, that was just so easy for people to say that don't deal with the constant racism and deal with the trauma. And for me, it's generational trauma. And for him, he experienced it, and I think it was a very important, a good movie and I'm happy that it's out there and people are learning from it.
Yeah, I think one of my things that I was left with in terms of being curious is, where's this book? Is this a book that maybe we should encourage it be part of, high school curriculum? I want to read the book now because I didn't even realize it was a movie that was made from a book. Yeah. And so I'm curious about that myself. The movie was excellent, but in terms of enduring, for years to come, and in terms of making sure that this is something that is not forgotten and is continued to be taught. I think that the fact that in Canada they're showing this movie to high schoolers and they've created lessons around it and deemed it appropriate for teenagers, and they've already done all this work. I would like to see something like this taught here and used to teach our teens about it, because the story is the same. The story is the same.
And I feel like with that, it'll get the kids' imagination out, so they'll be able to see it with their own brains and imagine it in their minds while reading the book. Okay, this is what happened to them. They were in the cellar by themselves, and they could imagine that they're in that 4x4 cellar by themselves with nobody there, nothing, just themselves. Or when they get their hair cut, they could visualize them, female, male, whatever, getting their hair cut, just visualizing that. So maybe it could help to diverse that and make people see, like, oh, okay, it really did happen. This is exactly what they did go through.
Exactly. Or imagine having your language taken away, or being punished for speaking the only language you know.
Yeah, I think another part that we really didn't touch upon was the addiction services and the addiction and how that's affected our people. And that I thought that was a really powerful scene when they had their talking circle and they were talking about, the things that they've gone through and what they're trying to deal with. And Saul really couldn't bring himself to talk about it yet and I think wasn't that something like the first line of the movie? Mm-hmm. He's not going to be able to deal with it until he, I'm not quite sure what the quote was.
Well, understands
it.
Well,
it's like, so in order to understand where you're going or where you're going to go, I'm paraphrasing, but, to understand where you're going to go, you have to understand where you came from.
Yes.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and that was the basis of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, you see a drunk Indian sitting on the sidewalk over there, and you're like, look at the drunk Indian, and, that's a stereotype that we've dealt with for a long time. But you don't know the story.
Right.
And there you go. And this is the story on how that came to be. And these people, some of them do end up getting a spouse and getting married and trying to raise children with no parenting skills. They grew up with role models who were beating children raping children, killing children, and these were the role models growing up, and they don't know how to express any sorts of emotion, and they don't have any job skills, and they don't really have any parenting skills because they didn't grow up with any, and a lot of them are turned into be alcoholics and drug abusers, and they have children and they raise them with those issues, and that's where we go with the generational trauma. And they can't and they can't express their emotion and tell their children they love them because they had part of the coping mechanisms is to turn off your emotions, and then you get so used to it, and when you have your own children, you can't even hug your own children and tell them that you love them,
or even speak. You just stay numb. Like my grandfather, I think I maybe hear him say 2 words the entire time I'm with him. The other time, he's complete silence.
Yeah, shaking his head.
Nods his head yes, and nods his head no.
Right. So that part is powerful too. There's other layers. The stereotypes are there's some truth in them, but also how did they get there? And the movie really addresses some of that.
Yeah.
You see, there was the whole section when he ran into Lonnie, sitting down the alley. It was like 10 Indigenous men sitting there, and there was a nice cultural reference in there when he just nodded his head to each other, and then Ronnie pointed out, it's like, hey, that's what you guys do. It's something we do culturally. We see another Native person, even if you don't know them, you just nod your head to them and just keep walking. And we did that one time when he was little. We had that at the mall. He was like, "Who's that?" I was like, "I don't know." He was like, "Why'd you do that?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "You nodded your head at him. You guys nod your head." It's just something we do when we see each other. We don't know each other. We don't even slow down. See each other, 10 feet away. Just like do your chin at each other and just keep on walking. Don't even. And I guess they call that the nod to each other, right? Or a little nod to whoever. Yeah. And that was a nice little cultural reference in there that some people probably wouldn't get if they weren't. They just go right by them if they're not Indigenous. Yeah.
Well, now we know.
Right. The secret is out. You can throw some people off and give them the chin nod when you see them, and they'll be like, "Where are you from?" Yeah.
Nice.
Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you both for all of your insights and sharing so much.
I want to hear something.
Okay.
From another person of color too.
Hey. So I was thinking a lot with just listening, which is why I haven't said as much because I was just listening. But you, Ronnie, had mentioned before about the incident. Well, we both had mentioned about the incident with bullying and everything, and how nothing was done. Whereas, the Pittsford versus Greece game, when it was racial slurs against a black player, there was all this sort of stuff done. And I feel as though I'm like, in the same way that was dealt with, I'm like, this should have been something. I mean, we were constantly talking about how all of these racist things are happening to Indigenous people, and yet no one does anything or cares. There's no apologies, nothing like that. Like, this should have been something that was already being addressed. Like, you say this horrible thing, there are consequences, and also part of those, and then part of how you move on is addressing it, apologizing to the person, and then changing your behavior. But of course we're not seeing that. And so it just, I mean, I'm not shocked, but I'm also like, y'all, it's 2022. We're with all of these corporations and organizations are talking about how they're trying to be, diverse and inclusive, but y'all aren't doing the work. You're not doing enough. And so, yeah, in the same way that incident was handled, the same should be for Indigenous people, for anyone facing racism. And I think part of that is, I don't even necessarily know if it's because people don't know. And I'm sure there are people who don't know, but it's like you've also had all of this time to like educate yourself, you know, about what's going on, to tune into Indigenous people who are talking about these very instances in the same way, because I can only talk about my experience, but in the same way that, you know, Black people have been saying, well, Google is free. You know, you can just educate yourself and look this up. The same should be done, you know, with all other communities. Like, even as a Black person, like someone who's outside of the Indigenous community, I'm like, I'm not expecting any Indigenous person to come up to me and educate me. That's on me. That's my responsibility, to go out there and learn. So, yeah. So I hear you when you say that. And honestly, seriously, more should be done, because this should not be happening. Like, shouldn't have been happening, and it shouldn't be happening now. Like, wake up, people. It's 2022, about to go into 2023. Do better. Like,
Yeah.
Not wrong.
Well, that the viewpoint I agree with about, you know, it's not our job to educate you, and you should be doing it yourself. Google is free and all that. Yeah. And people are lazy, and people need to be called on things, and people need to be made aware, and people need to people don't know what they don't know. So by taking that viewpoint, which is what a lot of people say, not a lot's going to happen. Because I didn't take that viewpoint. I was like, okay, I'll help them, and I'll help them to become better. It's not my job. No, it isn't. It's not my job to educate you. It's not my job to educate them. It's not my job to educate anybody. No, it isn't. But how are they going to get educated? They're not going to. They've had 400 years to get educated, and they were going backwards.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I had to go in there and say, well, what are you guys going to do? And the answer is nothing. So if I say it's not my job, then who's going to do it?
Gotcha.
So
that's why change is happening. And
but a lot of so working with Ron and you know, working in solidarity to move our community forward, I think a lot of what Ron does is holds communities accountable. So by walking in and saying, what are we going to do to change this? I'll work with you. You're holding communities accountable. It's not more like, I'm going to tell you what you did wrong. It's more like, this is not okay. What are you going to do to change it? So that's accountability.
Right.
And that's different than saying, I'm here to do a workshop with you and tell you everything. Right? So there's a different way to approach that and to inspire learning and, you know, bringing folks to the table and you know, in that instance, you know, a lot of the work that's been done in that district is spearheaded and inspired by that conversation, that initial conversation. But it has been a lot of, like, you know, more accountability focused, like, okay, we need to learn. There needs to be learning going on. And then coming back and checking in and having that accountability, which is one way to do the work, really.
Right.
And especially if, like, schools are named after Native American people and their clans and things like that, that people should be educated in it. Not just say, oh, yeah, I go to Seneca. Well, what's Seneca stand for?
Right.
I don't know. How do you know that? You go to that school, you're supposed to know what Seneca means.
Yes.
You're supposed to know.
Yes. And so we definitely need to make sure, like, that our children know and understand that. Because, like, to Ron's point, the children don't know what they don't know.
Right.
You know, the little kids that go there, they really don't know. And that's on us. Yeah.
Yeah. And in Irondequoit, don't they have a school called Iroquois School?
They do. Yes. Yes.
And you think that the students should know what that means and what that represents.
And they do now.
Right. Good.
Yep.
And I think my request is that they should fly our flag. If you're going to use our name and you're going to call your school the Iroquois School, then why don't you fly the Iroquois flag in front of your school? Makes sense to me.
Yep. And there's a flag inside every school now, so we're getting closer, and at least all the kids now know what the Haudenosaunee Confederacy is and what the Hiawatha Belt, what the flag is, and
And
they
that's
understand.
and that's spreading as well, because Pittsford schools just called and said they want to start heightening their awareness, and so yeah, it's spreading, and it's a good thing. I'm really happy and proud about that it's spreading to Pittsford as well. Right. I'm sorry that it had to happen about what happened to my son is what you said spearheaded this whole thing. But if any good can come from it, then that's, it wasn't a wasted opportunity. And when people say that there's, no good can come from anger, you're not in a good place when you're angry, and nothing good can come from it. I disagree with that. I was very angry about what happened to my son, and some really good, and I decided to do something about it, and some good things happened from that.
But from what you taught us, we try to do everything with a good mind.
Yeah, that's
forward,
our
so.
cultural teaching.
Yes.
I get reminded about that quite often, actually.
It's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. Try to start my day every day with the Thanksgiving address to keep myself in a good mind. Say it a couple times a day.
It's good to keep. It's a good thing.
Yeah,
it's a good thing, right?
It's like, yeah, it's okay. I have to be true to my culture. Right.
And
it's not always easy.
Yes, you have to do what you tell us to do, Ron.
Right.
Yes. But thank you.
From the teachers of the Peacemaker.
That's right.
Right.
So you tell us that, and we remind you too, and we keep we're going to keep each other accountable, right?
Right.
But I cannot thank you enough, both of you, for being here and for having this discussion with us. I want to thank our listeners. And to our listeners, thank you so much for your support of our Voices Project and our Representation in Cinema podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at www.ourvoicesproject.com. For more information about what we do, you can go to that website. Sign up for our newsletter there too, to be the first to get notifications about podcast episodes and new podcasts. You can listen to this episode and others under Representation in Cinema on any of the platforms listed on our website. Again, at www.ourvoicesproject.com/podcast. This has been Courtney Schaus, your host for this episode of Representation in Cinema of Our Voices Project. Thank you again for listening. And this episode of Representation in Cinema was recorded at the Food About Town studio and brought to you by Curate Meals. Curate makes it easy to experience and support the wide range of Rochester's diverse restaurants. You order a meal that feeds 2 people for $35, and all you have to do is pick it up at Three Heads Brewing. They even pick a beer that goes best with the food that day. Go to curatemeals.com and order for one of their events in January. Thanks again to Curate for sponsoring this episode.